Okay. Alrighty, well here we are back at the in the basement, and there's a few items that I use for glazing. Number one is I have a set of tongs here, and the tongs are used by clamping them on the pot and being able to dip the whole pot into the glaze. That's if you have to dip the whole pot into the glaze. We also have a large brush. A lot of people I know, when they're glazing, they wash their pots off. Washing a pot defeats the glaze and shouldn't be done. Brush your pot off if it's dusty. Even if they're real dusty, you might want to re-bisque them to get the dust burnt off. Never, and I repeat, never dip your pot in water or run it under the faucet to get it, because it's supposedly too dry or whatever you've heard about that kind of stuff. It just isn't true, folks. It just isn't true. When you wet the pot, you've defeated the purpose of the glaze. The glaze is in suspension of water. When you dip the pot in the emulsion of glaze and water, the water goes into the pot, leaving a film on the outside of the pot, and that's the glaze. If you wet the pot, there's nowhere for the water to go. So what you want to do is dust your pots, blow them off, or stick them back in the bisque kiln. Don't ever wet the pots before glazing. You'll end up with a skinny glaze in the wet spots and maybe a full glaze in the dry pots. And never fill up a pot with glaze on the inside, like a liner glaze or a different colored glaze as a liner, and then pour that out, and then immediately go to the other colored glaze and dip your pot in. This is just a no-no. Once you've saturated the pot from the inside, and then you try to reglaze the pot with a second color on the outside, what happens to you then is the second coat has the water's got nowhere to go into the pot. Consequently, you get a skinny glaze on the outside and a fat glaze on the inside. In this shop, when we do a pot, if it's two colorways, we do the first color one day and wait at least one day, because we're in a humid climate, not in Arizona or in Miami, where you might be able to get away in a dry country to get your pot to dry out sufficiently to put a second color on the same day. But we guys that live in the north or in the more humid areas, that pot's not going to dry out until you let it sit overnight and then do the second color the next day. And that's how it works. So now let's get started with some glazing. So we have a high-speed mixing tool here, and what we're going to do is take some of the pots on the shelf here, which I decided to do, and we're going to do what's called first coat. Alrighty, so here I'm going to do first coat. Here's a nice pot that's already been waxed on the bottom, and I use wax. I use hot wax. I don't use that emulsion stuff that seems to run all over the place. Hot wax, if it's melted to a relatively low temperature and is kept that way, won't catch on fire, won't burn your shop down, and does a much better job of coating the bottom of the pots, and also you can use the pots immediately. I also mix the glaze every single time I put a pot in the glaze. So the suspension of your materials in water, sometimes they'll fall away into the bottom of the pot, into the bottom of the bucket, and it creates a problem by getting the true color to come out on a pot. Now you watch me what I'm going to do, and you might not agree with me, but if you use the hydrometer and get your glazes set up properly, you will see that this will work. And naturally, the telephone is ringing, which it always does. I'm going to turn it off right after this clip.